So, where do we start? I guess you guys all want to quit smoking, huh?
That's right.
And you probably have your reasons, huh? How many cigarettes do you think you guys have smoked? Anybody know how to do some math?
A day?
Oh, no, I mean over your lifetime.
Oh, no. I can't do the math.
Let's see now. How old are you again?
23.
And you're how old?
52. Same, 52. We're twins.
And
51. You guys are older than me.
Now I cannot tell the difference. You guys are together.
26.
are you identical twins?
Yeah.
Let's see now. Do you have any idea why? Have you guys tried to quit smoking before?
Yeah, I did it twice.
And how long did you go?
6 months usually.
And then what got you started again?
Stress and everything, problems.
How about you? Did you ever try to quit?
Once.
How long did you quit?
About 3-4 months, I believe.
How about you?
I was in, when was it, about a year and a half ago. You did a talk with me and quit for about 5 months and then started over again.
Oh, so I made you a tape and everything, huh? Oh, what happened to your tape?
You smoked it?
I listened to it, but it just, there was a lot of life stress and just a whole bunch of family things all together. No jokes.
No.
He's the troublemaker of the whole group.
Who? Oh, huh?
Yeah.
Let's see, what's your name? And your name again? And I forgot your name too. Well, I guess the whole thing about addiction, see, I think people a lot of times don't really understand that. Why, what it is, what's going on, why they have this, why it's hard. Now, was it hard for you when you quit? Or did you, then you took it up 6 months later?
No, it wasn't too hard at all. Except I was around with the other people smoking, so there was a problem.
Now, how about when you quit? Was it hard?
Even though it was for a medical reason that I was forced to quit, I had a collapsed lung.
You had a what?
Collapsed lung.
Oh.
Yep. So I had to quit for like 3-4 months, I believe it was. But then I went back to it.
Oh, was it hard though?
Yeah, it was. The cravings.
And then it was hard, but when you went back to it for 3 or 4 months, were you still having cravings 3 or 4 months later? You quit for 3 months, so then it was really hard when you quit, huh?
Yeah, and I did try the patch, but that didn't work.
But you still didn't go back, huh?
Now for 3-4 months, no.
Yeah, now in that 3 or 4 months, did you keep having cravings the whole time?
No,
So how long did the cravings last?
just about all day long. I just wanted a cigarette.
Yeah, I mean, how many days? Well, it didn't go on the whole time, did it?
Oh, no. It was probably the first 2 or 3 weeks that I was...
2 or 3 weeks, huh?
I was really like, I'll do it. But I couldn't. I was sick. So that was the main motivation.
So then when you took it up again, though, you were not really having cravings at that time. You were not being bothered all day long.
No, I could be around people smoking. I wouldn't smoke.
Do you remember when you took it back up?
Stress built up and...
The what?
Stress.
Stress built up?
Mm-hmm. And I took it back.
How about you? Did you ever quit?
Yeah, about 3 different times for like probably 5 months at a time.
Now, did you have problems? Did you have the cravings did they last the whole 5 months?
No, they didn't last the whole 5 months. And then probably the first cigarette was just maybe like a social cigarette, and then it just went back in to the same cycle again.
Oh, were you drinking?
Yeah, a little bit.
When you had the social cigarette?
Yeah.
How about the rest of you? Were you drinking when you had the social cigarette? Or your first cigarette after quitting?
No, not that I remember. But just whenever I have a drink, it calls for a cigarette.
Ah.
Yeah. They go together. Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people that they've quit, then they'll be out drinking with somebody. And then they forget that I don't smoke anymore.
Yeah, and then there's certain rules like that I would follow. Just I would smoke cigarettes just when I was drinking and not when I wasn't. You know what I mean?
Then you started drinking to have more cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
So, well, there's, I guess, like a conditioned response. Now, what does that mean? And you might have an idea because I probably went through this with you. Do you remember anything about that? The conditioned response. Pavlov's dogs. Remember anything about Pavlov's dogs?
I don't recall.
See, the tobacco companies count on Pavlovian conditioning. Now, you might not have heard that, but Pavlov used to give he had this is over 100 years ago. He would give the dog some meat powder, and then he'd ring a bell. Now, if you give a dog meat powder, it will salivate. So he'd give him meat powder and ring a bell. And then after a while, then he found out that he could just ring the bell without the meat powder, and they would salivate. Like conditioned response. So you connect a couple things together and then you can have a conditioning thing. Now what are other conditioning things? Well, like let's say electric fence, and you wonder if that's true. So you can check it. Oops. Now that's going to be a conditioned response. When you see electric fence, you're not going to grab it anymore. And so how else could a conditioned response work? Well, there's probably a million different ways that a conditioned response could work. Like, let's say you just met this pretty girl and then you see her naked. There's probably things going to happen to your body. Probably not necessarily unpleasant things, but that's a conditioned response. It's kind of like instead of expecting meat powder, you're expecting a little something different. And so then if you looked out at a part of your body has probably responded to
Right.
this naked girl, conditioned response.
That's right.
So now how does this work for smoking? And then what does smoking do? See, smoking is it's a mild narcotic. In other words, just kind of a mild, kind of like a little sense of, just a mild version of, say, a downer. Yeah, but then also it's contradictory because also it has a stimulant in there. It's mild stimulant too. So you can kind of, you can be like a little foggy, and then a cigarette seems to clear your brain because it will actually change your heart rate, so it acts like a little bit of a stimulant and then also like a mild narcotic. So it's kind of a funny effect. But then the biggest effect it has is that your body very easily and very quickly gets used to having the levels of nicotine in your body. But it isn't just nicotine, because the cigarette companies, they have found that you can add other things to the tobacco. And they've done some studies on that, but like a lot of times they still haven't come up. Now they know for sure that they spray the tobacco leaves with nicotine. They've extracted nicotine, then they spray the leaves with nicotine. So then you're getting a double dose of nicotine. And so are today's cigarettes more addicting than cigarettes were? I mean, can you get addicted sooner, faster? Yeah, because but now if you had a $10 billion industry and you wanted to increase usage, do you think you just might hire some people to study how to get more loyalty? They'd probably have 30 or 40 chemists working for them at any one time, maybe 100. And what are these chemists doing? They're studying, let's try to add a little bit of this. I remember one time during the hearings over, they said, no, there's nothing wrong with smoking cigarettes. It's not addicting. They had, tons of paperwork of the tobacco companies showing it was addicting, but they denied that. They said, oh no, nothing wrong. But then they had some scientists at the meeting, and they said, we found these other 30 or 40 substances in there. What are these? One we've identified as nicotine. And they said, we don't know anything about those other things. But, if you got that kind of big an industry, and then you've got all these scientists working for you, engineers and chemists, you might add a little something to this tobacco and see, now what effect does this have? What effect does that have? This group of people, did they say they had more of a craving after smoking this for 2 weeks, or more of a craving after smoking that 2 weeks. Rate your desire to have a cigarette. So over the years, they have found a number of substances that will increase your craving for a cigarette. As soon as you go a little while without one, then you will have a more of a withdrawal, more addiction. And then and why are they allowed to do this? Now, there was talk about putting the tobacco industry under the Food and Drug Administration, but I don't think that happened yet. And so right now, the tobacco industry is under the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms industry. Now, that's ATF. Do you think ATF is worried about this little thing or that little thing? No, ATF, those are the cowboys. They were out there, trying to shoot people and everything. Now, if it ever gets under the Food and Drug Administration, they're probably going to take a look at, well, what's in there? But right now, nobody cares what's in there. So they can put anything in there they want. And you guys are living proof that it works. And so what I tell people is, to me, that sounds like a conspiracy. Now, what is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is kind of when people are plotting against you behind your back. And what are they trying to get from you? Maybe money. A lot of times it's money. Maybe most of the time it's money. Sometimes your life, if they... but I'd say the tobacco companies qualify as having engaged in a conspiracy because they have conspired or plotted or planned behind your back to manipulate you to get you to continue smoking their cigarettes. And they have, by adding these various substances, and they have done this without your knowledge. So it's kind of like a license to poison. And it doesn't look like their license is going to get revoked anytime soon. Was that, a cough?
Yes.
Well, you're not quite dead yet, huh?
On the way.
So anyway, they get you get the nicotine and whatever else is in there, but then you've all had the experience, like after, for you, 2 to 3 weeks, some people a few days, some people 10 days, that you didn't have that constant craving. So it's like you were home free, all of you, home free. You won, you licked, you beat them. And why did you go back? The tobacco company, you had broken the grip. You had broken the grip they had on you. Why did you go back? Well, stress. Or in your case, a social cigarette with a couple beers. So kind of you get disarmed. You get your usual vigilance is removed, kind of taken away. You kind of get a little lax. So now getting into what happens when we smoke a cigarette. Now the first cigarette, the first 2 cigarettes, especially the very first time you smoke, it may not do a lot to you. It may give you kind of this little funny feeling, but you didn't smoke that cigarette to stop pain or discomfort or anxiety. But it doesn't take long. Maybe you smoke 1 cigarette, or people can like go to a bar where everybody's smoking and not smoke, but the next day have this strange urge for a cigarette. I need a cigarette. Why? Because you got it in your system. Now your system's taking it out, and it objects. It's kind of like it's already used to it. It's already that chemical gets in there, then your body starts missing it. So you've all been through that. The first few days of actual physiological withdrawal, when your body is kicking, is eliminating the poisons. But it's just like heroin. Is heroin good for us? Well, no, heroin isn't good for us. And yet, if we're taking it and we quit, our body objects. It says, no, I need more of that. Well, there's just certain substances that you put it in there and then you stop it, our body objects. And there's a lot of things like that, like psychotropic medications, the antidepressants. If you are taking those and you try to stop suddenly, your body just goes into a tailspin. And so people taking antidepressants, especially the SSRIs, have to taper off. They cannot just quit. And so even alcohol, you have a certain amount in your system, you just suddenly stop. It could be dangerous. You have to taper off, even alcohol, when you're drinking a lot. So anyway, but you all went through that. You all went through the few days, or two, in your case, 2 or 3 weeks of, I want a cigarette, I want a cigarette. But then you did find out as time went on, by 2 weeks, it was probably now and then, just kind of now and then. Then after another week, it was gone. But then something triggered it again later. I want a cigarette. It was not going into withdrawal. Because see, why when, before we've gone through that withdrawal of a few days to 3 weeks, why do we have that craving? What is it? Why do we want that cigarette? Our body will get used to a certain nicotine level. So you've smoked a cigarette. As soon as you put that cigarette out, your body is starting to go into withdrawal. It's already starting to take some of the stuff, some of the poison, some of them, put some of it, put it in the bladder, remove it, trying to get it out of the bloodstream. And after about an hour, then the level is lower than it was right at the time you smoked the cigarette. And so just that level being a little lower, then your body will be kind of, what is it? Well, it's getting to be time for a cigarette. Your body will tell you it's time for a cigarette. And maybe you won't even notice. You just reach in your pocket, and then you got one in your mouth all lit up. It becomes automatic. You don't even have to think anymore. It just, when that, you're doing this or that, working at this or that, but just suddenly there's that cigarette in your mouth, all automatic, on the automatic autopilot. But now let's say you go 3 hours, you're in a long church meeting, you can't smoke. Now sometimes people will be distracted enough with what's going on that it doesn't bother them. But then it's like somehow they've suppressed the urge. But then like as soon as they get in their car, even though they put it off for 3 hours, 4 hours, you can't smoke here, you can't, and I didn't even feel the craving. But then as soon as they got in their car, or as soon as they walked outside, then they smoked 2 or 3 to make up, get that nicotine level back up. So what happens when you smoke a cigarette? When you're getting a little nervous, you're getting a little anxious, you're going into withdrawal, it stops, doesn't it? That little nervousness, that little anxiety stops. And withdrawal, whether it's an hour without a cigarette, 2 hours, 4 hours, as you're addicted, and it gets worse and worse, the withdrawal, the anxiety, the tension, one cigarette will stop all that. Kind of, wow, oh yeah. See, now if you draw a chart of like, here's the average person's tension level. Now we're not talking about one of those nut cases where they're always, but just say the average person, non-smoker, they're going to have a little tension during the day. But you guys, it's like this, you're smoking, maybe you wake up and the tension starts going up. I need a cigarette, so it's going higher, higher. Smoke a cigarette, it goes down, pretty close to normal. But pretty soon it's on its way back up, back down, on its way back up, back down, on its way back up, throughout the day. So then if you plot average tension, anxiety level, you guys are twice as high as the normal. Even though, when you smoke the cigarette, you take it back down close to normal pretty quickly. So, yeah, you guys are kind of going through a lot more tension in an average day. Now, you probably remember that, don't you? When you quit, weren't you a little less agitated most of the time? Weren't you a little calmer overall?
Yeah.
And now that you're back, you kind of a little bit more twitchy, a little bit more, maybe, do you get irritated a little easier since you're back on the cigarettes? But the overall tension level, you can see that up and down, and you can feel that all day, up and down, up and down, up and down. Oh, I need a cigarette. And then a little, I need a cigarette. Back down, back down. So now here's where the conditioned response comes in. Because let's say, probably a lot of times when you are kind of a little, you're on the up cycle because it's been taken out of your body, just by coincidence. Maybe the boss comes in and has a temper tantrum. Now, I'm not saying your boss, Dave, of course. He would never have a temper tantrum. But some bosses someplace might come in and have a temper tantrum. And so you're there like this. And so you're already in withdrawal, and you're already feeling a little nervous. And then the boss's temper tantrum makes you more nervous. How am I going to fix that? A cigarette fixes both.
Mm-hmm.
It fixes the withdrawal and fixes the tension over the temper tantrum. So in other words, you take the withdrawal, you stop the withdrawal, drops the anxiety, and it's kind of like it takes the other anxiety down a little bit too. So in other words, after a while, you think of crisis, cigarette. Crisis, nervous, makes me tense, nervous, cigarette. But then if you aren't addicted, it doesn't work. You have to be addicted. Because if you're just smoking your first cigarette and you're real nervous and tense, you smoke your first cigarette, you're more nervous. Because that's what the first cigarette does. So the cigarette only works when it stops withdrawal. But there are exceptions. We get into the placebo effect. What's the placebo effect? That's like somebody's in pain and they're getting morphine every 4 hours. And they say, let's give them a placebo. Let's say this is a morphine, but it's a saline solution. Okay, it's time for your, doc, I'm starting to hurt. Time for my shot. Okay, here's your morphine. Only it's saline solution. Well, how'd that work? Oh yeah, I feel a lot better. I feel a lot better. Okay, 4 hours later. Oh doc, my pain's building up again. It's time for my shot. Oh yeah, okay, here it is. Oh yeah, how's that feel? Oh, I feel a lot better. But about 3 or 4 times, they say, doc, that stuff isn't working. So in other words, even the placebo effect will only work so long. But if you are expecting some relief from something, and you've had relief from something many, many times, then you don't need to have that actually giving you relief, because it's the expectation of the relief. Now that might be a little complicated, because it is. It kind of changes depending on the situation. So you guys, you haven't smoked for a few months. Something happens, some kind of stress, some kind of crisis, something, you're nervous, you're upset. And then your mind tells you, don't you remember? Don't you remember what you used to do when you were nervous, you're upset? Don't you remember? 5,000 times. Or I've had people 250,000 times. One person I had 500,000 times. That's the most cigarettes anybody that I've seen has smoked in their lifetime. If you guys add up your cigarettes, you'd probably have at least 100,000, maybe 200,000 cigarettes. And so 100,000 times, 200,000 times. Now maybe you, it's only 10, 15, 20,000, maybe 30,000. But a cigarette is the most reliable thing that you ever had. Because was there ever a time, once you got addicted, once you're through that process of a few days, maybe it takes a cigarette, then the next day a couple of cigarettes, and then 4 or 5 days. Now, if you don't have one, you start getting nervous, so you're addicted again. And now you need the cigarette to stop the withdrawal. You don't want to go through that discomfort. So sure enough, the cigarette works again. It might not work right away for the person just smoking the first time. It's not going to relieve them the way it does somebody that's addicted and the body's trying to pump out the poisons. So what is it? Months and months later, the mind says, oh, you have to, you need a cigarette. Because it's thousands and thousands of times, just like Pavlov's dogs, just like meat powder bell, conditioned response. So months and months later, stress, what should I do? What should I do? And your mind says, don't you remember? There's 200,000 other times what you did. You were under stress, and it took care of it, made it go away. So that's what you should do. You better grab a cigarette. So you grab a cigarette, and it kind of feels like it relieved the stress. Kind of feels like things are better. And why? Because you just smoked that cigarette. It didn't stop withdrawal because you weren't in withdrawal. So what was it? See, that's the placebo effect. It happened so many times in the past that it stopped withdrawal. So now you feel like it's stopping. You feel better because you felt better 200,000 times before. less anxious 200,000 times before would you smoke a cigarette. So, that's it. It's just kind of like a simple conditioned response, you could say. And the tobacco company counts on it. So, what can you do about it when, assuming you're all going to quit, because you all quit before, what are you going to do? So the big trouble is down the line. What are you going to do about it when that urge comes down the line? See, that's the test. When your body says, remember, it always works. It always works. So relapse prevention. I'm kind of hoping that you'll remember and kind of like be able to say it's a trick. It's it's a trick. It's a condition. It's like my body's saying, like I'm under stress. I need a cigarette, and that I'm not in withdrawal. It's not going to make me feel better. It's not going to reduce tension, anxiety, except that if I think it is because I remember how it did in the past. So, in other words, it's like your own mind playing tricks on you, from past memory. It's kind of, it has to work. It has to be working. But that's the time when the urges come later, because you all seem to have made it through quitting. It's later. Are you going to remember to tell yourself, I'm not going to let my mind be tricked? And it turns out that urges, just like you all found out, when you quit, when you're really addicted, the urges come and go. They don't stay real, they may last a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Even on the first day, the worst day, if you added up all the times you were kind of like, I need a cigarette, it was probably less than an hour. It seems like more. Probably by the end of 2 or 3 weeks, it might have been, 5 minutes off and on during the day. Do you remember, like, the first day? Was it like all day, or was it just kind of off and on?
It was off and on to me.
Even the first day was off and on. It did not keep up going the whole time. So 4 or 5 months down the road, again, assuming that you're all going to quit, and so the real danger is later, you're going to have the urge again because you see somebody smoking, because you feel tension and your mind says, don't you remember those 200,000 times when it made you feel better? Don't kid yourself, you need it. Oh, you think you can get by without it? Huh? Oh no, this is real critical. This is it, baby, this time. Look at it, worked all them other times. So do you want to feel better or not? And so then 6 days later, there you are, puffing away one every hour, and your body's kind of being slowly eaten apart again, and the lungs and all that stuff. So the trick is going to be to remember that this will pass. And I guess, like Nancy Reagan, I think she was a little bit simplistic in the whole thing. Just say no. But see, if you do say no, no matter what the crisis is, no matter what the stress is, no matter if your girlfriend dies, your dog dies, if you can just say no to the cigarette, the urge will pass. And it's just kind of waiting it out. And if you haven't smoked for a month or a few months, the urge is not gonna be like when you were addicted. It keeps coming back. It's just kind of like, it's gonna be there for a minute, 2 minutes, and then maybe 5 minutes. But then to give in to that urge, and then cut yourself short 20 years. Because, there's different figures, but some people say it's only 10 years that it cuts off your life. But then I guess a lot of times heavy smokers, the last 10 years, you don't see the last 10 years of a lot of heavy smokers. Why? Because it's kind of hard for them to carry their oxygen around. And so they mostly just stay at home. Other people do the shopping for them. They don't go out. Every once in a while you see a smoker, with the oxygen. But the last 10 years, they're not real happy. They're not real, you know what I mean? They're not having fun. So and then they still die at least 10 years sooner. So then if you look at it that way, it's like the price you're paying by not saying no. It could be 10 years on oxygen, and then plus checking out 10 years sooner than you would have or needed to. So will you be able to just say no down the road, or sit there and wait, or do some deep breathing? But smoking isn't a lot different from a lot of other addictions. You know, like the guy that drinks, that he can quit for years. Something happens. Now, I guess, you could talk about triggers to go back to drinking. Could be probably any one of several hundred triggers, But AA, they say, halt. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So any of those, you're hungry, then, kind of your brain says, don't you remember you used to be hungry? You'd have a drink and it'd feel better. Angry, don't you remember when you get angry and you'd have a drink and you'd feel better? Now then if you have 10 more drinks, then you go get your gun. But the first couple of drinks, the anger seems to go away. But then it comes back as you keep drinking. Then you become dangerous. But a couple of drinks and your mind will remind you what a couple of drinks will do to anger. Lonely? I've talked to people like this guy said, I was really lonely. Then I started drinking, and then it's like, hey, it was like a party. I was having a party, I was playing my Game Boy, I was doing this and that, and it was like, I'm not lonely anymore. It was a party of one, and then the drinking took care of that. And then tired. I guess drinking will take care of tired too. But anyway, what are the triggers for going back to smoking? Probably at least 2 of those same triggers. Getting angry. I need a cigarette. Because see, anger, a lot of tension building up. And what does nicotine do when tension is built up from withdrawal? It drops the tension down. Lonely. Yeah. So anyway, it isn't so much what to do quitting. It's how to stay quit. And then the same with the same with the alcohol. The same how to stay quit down the road. So this is where he went back, and so now you probably got more bad stuff with your heart, more cough, more. Is that right? Your health is. You did a little better on your health, and now it's kind of. Or did you notice any difference?
I mean, I'm going to do it before I have health issues.
Yeah, I know you were doing a lot of sports, those games. Did you speed up a little? Did you kind of notice you still did the sports, didn't you, after you quit?
It was a lot easier. It was a little bit more.
Okay, see, in other words, you were healthier, faster, quicker, better, stronger, longer. Even people's sex life gets better when they're not smoking. A lot of people's sex life went up in smoke. So if you guys have any macho stuff in you at all, you want to make sure that you can do peak performance on the basketball court and in the bedroom, then maybe you never notice it. Think about it. Weren't you better when you quit? Better in the bedroom when you quit?
I think about that one.
Well, now you don't have to reveal too much here, but anyway, those are.
Yeah, you don't want Ramon to start revealing stuff.
What's my chance?
You missed your chance.
But anyway, that's just one of the things, and that's one of the things. I mean, one of the articles I read is, your sex life gone up in smoke? Because it does. It gets in the way. Why? Constricting arteries, constricting blood vessels, squeezing down, tightening them up. And what is one of the things that happens in sex? Dilated arteries, opening up, filling up. Mm-hmm. And when you got the smoke squeezing the arteries down, you're fighting something there that is kind of like unnecessary. So I guess getting convinced to quit isn't as hard as how to stay quit. Now I just found this here. Changes your body goes through when you Quit. Within 20 minutes of the last cigarette, the blood pressure drops to normal. Well, that's assuming that, you don't have high blood pressure anyway. Pulse rate drops to normal. Body temperature of hands and feet increase to normal. So why does cigarettes cause your hands to be colder? Well, because of the constriction, the blood flow. See what I mean? It just tightens up. Now, there is a certain disease that, I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, they have to amputate people's toes and fingers. Have you heard of that?
Diabetes, something?
Huh?
Is it diabetes?
Well, from that, but this disease is directly related to smoking.
No.
In other words, it has constricted the blood flow to the hands and fingers so much that the tissue dies. And I can't remember the name of that. But now those are pretty heavy smokers. And it doesn't happen to everybody, obviously. But in other words, that is one of the things that happens. Your fingers will be colder or warmer. Have you ever noticed that difference after you quit smoking, that your hands were warmer more of the time? You noticed it? Or? Oh, okay, so you noticed that your hands would be warmer. Yeah, you're getting blood out there, all the way out to the end of the fingers. And so if you have a sore or a cut, it's going to heal faster. Same with back. If you have a back injury, smokers' back injuries heal a lot slower. Why? Because they're just not getting the blood through there with all the nutrients that they need and all the healing stuff. 8 hours after smoking, carbon monoxide level in blood drops to normal. Oxygen level in blood increases to normal. So, in other words, carbon monoxide, that's not real good for you, is it? That's something, and so the oxygen level and carbon monoxide level, that is something that changes over time. Because when you're smoking, you're not taking in oxygen, you're taking in carbon monoxide, which is not real good for your bloodstream. But just after 8 hours, that will change. So now, if you had a heart attack, well, let's say 100 people have a heart attack and 100 smokers have heart attacks. 50 quit and 50 don't. And the smokers, they had the heart attack, but by a couple of days, they're smoking again. Within a week, there's already a big difference in who has the second heart attack. By a couple months, the difference gets bigger and bigger. In other words, if you have a heart attack, the second heart attack, the chances of the second heart attack decreases if you quit smoking. So it's such a huge strain on your heart. 48 hours, nerve endings start regrowing. So yeah, does it do damage to your nerve endings? To ability to smell and to taste things increases after 48 hours. 72 hours. Bronchial tubes relax, making breathing easier. Lung capacity increases. See, this is all science. This is all stuff that they've done. So he found out he could go longer, harder, faster out on the basketball court after he quit. He could breathe more. His lung capacity increased. But he probably felt bad starting to beat the boss, so he had to get back to smoking. So the boss wouldn't get upset about John beating him out of the basketball court. So 2 weeks to 3 months, circulation improves. Walking becomes easier. Lung functions increase up to 30%. You had a collapsed lung, huh? You're working on that again, huh?
Yep. Yeah.
You're tired of having a good lung, working good. You got tired of that.
Yeah.
I feel better with a collapsed lung. That's 1 to 9 months. Coughing, sinus congestion. Fatigue, shortness of breath decrease. Yeah, that's one thing. Energy. People that quit smoking, they just they don't get tired all the time. They're not tired. It's like, wow, they can get through the day. Why does smoking wear you out so much? Well, you're not getting enough oxygen, for one thing. You're getting carbon monoxide. Also that tension, that up and down. Tension. People can be exhausted just from having that on and off tension. Being relaxed makes a big difference. Shortness of breath decreases. So if you have sinus stuff, that should start clearing up. And then 1 to 9 months, the cilia regrow in the lungs, increasing ability to handle mucus, clean the lungs, reduce infection. See, the cilia, there's little tiny hairs in your lungs. And these little hairs wave up and down. And then they have a little fluid on the end of them. And so you breathe stuff, and then the nasty stuff falls on these hairs. And then gradually gets worked back up. But smoke kills those hairs. And so you have nothing to protect the lungs. A smoker has nothing to, everything that comes in there just lands right on the lungs. Right on the lungs, and then eats its way in or does this or that. But if you quit smoking for a period of time, it said 1 to 9 months, but those hairs, they were not permanently done. They will come back, and then they start catching stuff. They clean their lungs. They kind of grab stuff. So do smokers get more lung infections? 1 to 9 months, the energy level increases. But some people are like, what am I going to do with all this energy? 5 years, lung cancer death rate for average smoker, that means a pack a day, decreases from 137 per 100,000 people to 72 per 100,000. So at 5 years, you still have a higher risk than normal of lung cancer. But you've cut your risk in half. So let me say that again. 137 per 100,000 when you're smoking to die from lung cancer to 72 per 100,000. So you cut it in half. But here, after 10 years, the rate drops to 12 deaths per 100,000. Or almost the rate of non-smokers. So even after 10 years, you still are not going to be quite as safe as somebody that never smoked in terms of lung cancer. But you've dropped very close to normal. So from 137 to 100,000 to 12 per 100,000. Now see, what causes cancer? Cancer is caused by a runaway cell. And a runaway cell is usually the result of some kind of injury. So in other words, when you're smoking and you kill a lot of the regular cells, and then these cells get replaced with a tougher cell, a hardier cell. But these cells are more prone to mutation, to kind of just start dividing randomly. And a smoker will probably have a few thousand of those offbeat cells in their lungs already. So they increase the chances of those offbeat cells just kind of kicking off, just starting to double the usual reproduction cycle of like a cell splitting. They just go wild and they just split. You know, your regular cell will just split after a certain period of time. So the precancerous cells after 10 years are replaced. But other cancers, and what other cancers are there? Cancers from smoking, cancers of the mouth, esophagus, bladder. Why bladder? Well, smokers should drink a lot of water to dilute the poisons. Because the bladder, a lot of times smokers get bladder cancer because heavy concentration of poisons irritates the lining of the bladder, eats away at it, and then you get those precancerous cells and then the cancer in the bladder. But anyway, the cancers of the mouth, larynx, esophagus, bladder, kidney, and pancreas decrease after 10 years. So in other words, cigarettes not only cause lung cancer, but they cause lots of other cancers too. Lots of cancer. Well, that's part of why people live longer when they quit. Because it isn't that they're going to live longer just from not having lung cancer, but because of all of these other cancers too, that they cut their risk way down. Now some people, I guess, I don't know if you ever heard this, die young and make a good-looking corpse. You ever heard that? You probably heard it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the longer you smoke, the uglier a corpse you're going to have. Now, you know, for some reason it hits women harder. Have you ever seen like a 50-year-old woman that looks like she's 80? The face is just, I don't know, just women's vascular system is different somehow. But men too. In other words, you get this, smokers over the years get this hard, leathery, wrinkly face. They start getting ugly. So if you want to be beautiful people forever, now if you don't care and you think, well, when I'm ugly, somebody's going to love me. maybe I'll get ugly to make sure that people can pass the test if they can love an ugly person. But it seems like it's just easier to not get ugly and get a beautiful person to love you than go with that test. Yeah, the wrinkled, weary, haggard look that smokers have. The color of the skin changes to kind of a yellowish, unhealthy. Crow's feet in the corner of the eyes. Gauntness, sinking of the cheek, leathery, worn, rugged appearance. Gray, orange, purple, red complexion. So anyway, I bet you guys can hardly wait till you get out of here to have a cigarette, huh?
Doing good so far.
Let's see if I got any other good stuff here. I'm going to be 75 in January, so my memory isn't what it used to be. Now here's like, why are cigarette smokers likely to have more heart attacks? There is different chemicals in the body, and nicotine attaches to a certain chemical that is like the trash truck that goes through the bloodstream and plucks cholesterol, excess cholesterol out of the bloodstream. And nicotine attacks that chemical and disables it, so it doesn't pick the trash out of the bloodstream. So you can have two people with the identical diet. One is a smoker and one is not. The identical diet, the identical amount of exercise. And the smoker arteries will be a lot more layered and full of plaque. So it's a high risk situation there.
You have reached the end of the first video in the Stop Smoking program. Please continue with Stop Smoking video number 2 in order to obtain the benefits of the full Stop Smoking program. It's recommended that you watch both Stop Smoking videos once a week for a few weeks to prevent temptations to relapse. Thank you and good luck.